Hello and welcome to Unit 3. For Unit 3, we will be discussing who's eligible. In the past 2 units, we've gone over the FAFSA application process, what is needed, and then Unit 2, we went over the types of aid that are available to students based on the federal, based on the information provided on the FAFSA application. So now, who is eligible for what and why? Basic eligibility, of course, is to demonstrate financial need. In this case, they're talking specifically to the federal Pell Grant. It doesn't take much to consider. Financial need doesn't necessarily go so much with the loans because it's a loan. It's just given to you in general, at least for the unsubsidized loan. As we discussed in the previous unit, the subsidized loan is a need-based loan. So that one, demonstrating financial need may actually be a good thing with regards to that particular loan. But for the unsubsidized loan, that one does not require much demonstrating of financial need. The Pell Grant, of course, does require you to show proof of financial need. You have to be an eligible U.S. citizen or an eligible non-U.S. citizen. I believe I went over that just a little bit briefly during Unit 2. And just to explain a little further, U.S. citizens, born in the country, obviously. Non-U.S. citizen could be someone who moved here from another country and became an eligible non-citizen using what would be given what it would be considered an alien registration card that allows them to live and work in the United States, and in some cases also allows them to receive federal funding for school. Of course, going over, again, you must have a social, which is given to U.S. citizen and eligible non-U.S. citizen. Of course, this goes into a little bit more details with regards to who are considered U.S. citizens. Some areas that we might not have thought of, or people living on the living on the Marshall Islands, they may have some issues, but we don't really see that a lot, nor does this necessarily apply for students already physically living in the United States. One very important thing is selective service, at least for all male students. For female students, it's not that much of a bother, but for male students between the age of 18 to 25, or in this case 26 sometimes, you are required to have registered for selective service. If you haven't, you will eventually need to provide proof as to why you were not able to register for selective service between the age of 18 and 25. If you are not able to show proof or come up with a reasonable reasoning, then your ability to receive federal student aid is not possible. This is a very strict rule, at least for male students. Very, very important, you must be enrolled and accepted into an actual degree-seeking program. So if they have what is considered non-degree seeking and degree seeking. Non-degree seeking programs do not receive financial aid. Degree seeking programs do. And of course, you also want to make sure you're going to a school that is getting federal student aid funding or Title IV funding. Must be enrolled at least half-time. Again, that applies to the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan in order for you to be eligible. And this just goes in a little bit more details about what is considered to be or what makes you qualify. This is just a quick breakdown of the basic necessities. Again, GED or high school diploma, obviously really important. enrolled in or accepted into an actual degree-seeking programs. And these I highlight these because they're very, very important. If you do not have a high school diploma or a GED, and actually try to apply for financial aid, you will run into some issues because this is a federal document. And if you state that you do have one when in reality you don't, you essentially commit a fraud, which is not very good. And most institutions will check to make sure that you did, of course, graduate high school or receive a GED. Again, must be enrolled in an actual degree seeking. Again, can't use non-degree seeking. You won't receive aid for a non-degree seeking degree program. Must have registered for selective service between the age of 18 and 25. Sounds repetitive, but it is extremely important. And again, Social Security card or Social Security number is extremely important. And of course, making sure that you sign the FAFSA. And lastly, which I didn't mention previously, maintaining satisfactory academic progress in college. This is extremely important. Once you've received financial aid, you need to be able to actually continue to receive it, and to do so, you need to make sure that you are actually maintaining the GPA requirements required by the school for continuous financial aid, to receive financial aid continuously. You may lose your financial aid eligibility at a school if you are not meeting their academic requirements. 6 ways you can lose your eligibility. Defaulting on previous student loans will prohibit defaulting on previous student loans. Basically, this means that you borrowed loans previously, and then you maybe got a job, or you took a break, and then you decided you want to go back to school. Now, during that break, or the chance of you actually getting a job, you completely forgot to pay your student loans, and they just went into default. When they're in default, you are not able to actually receive federal student aid while your loans are in default. You'll need to clear the default status in order for you to continue to receive federal student aid in the future. Failure to meet satisfactory academic progress. In other words, again, if you are not meeting the school's guidelines for academics, whether it may be they have a requirement of you meeting a GPA of a 2.0 or 2.5, if you are not meeting that requirement, then you are not meeting the requirement for the federal government either to continue to receive federal student aid. Getting a drug conviction. So this particular one might be a little confusing to understand, but to briefly explain, basically, if you are enrolled in a university and get caught or essentially got arrested with drugs, you are not eligible to receive federal student loans at all, because you received this charge while receiving federal student aid. That's where you lose your eligibility to actually receive financial aid in the future. Although some exceptions do apply, but still, it's not the best position to get caught in. Becoming incarcerated. If you become incarcerated while you are using FAFSA, you may lose some or all of your FAFSA eligibility. Again, there are some exceptions. In this particular scenario, it's more you happen to be going to school and you had to stop randomly because you got into some trouble. Again, that affects the eligibility for your ability to receive federal student aid funding as a whole, because your aid can be returned for you not actually meeting the requirement. That particular number 4 is actually linked to number 2, which is basically you not being able to participate. Changing to a non-eligible program. Again, this is going back to the non-degree seeking. Some programs do not qualify for federal student aid funding, and most universities will tell you ahead of time what programs do not qualify for Title IV funding and what programs do qualify for it. And lastly, dropping below the half-time requirements. And again, that goes more towards the loans, not necessarily the Pell Grant, because the Pell Grant is free money. And again, this does not apply to everyone. It applies to anyone who find themselves in this particular situation. So it's always best to be aware of everything before deciding to use financial aid.